Reviews. Well, I said I was going to do this a ways back, and I think it's going to be a really good video. And what do we look for when we're looking at a pocket knife? How do you inspect that pocket knife? How do you know that you're getting a good pocket knife? And this is one reason why eBay is a little bit sketchy for me, is because a lot of my bad knives, or knives that are not that don't really make me feel too good, are the ones that I purchased on eBay. And that's because a lot of times it seems like people are just trying to pawn off their garbage on eBay. So you really have to know who you're purchasing from. You want to make sure they have a good reviews, and maybe you even know the person from a club or whatever. So to get right on to this, I'm going to just show you how I inspect a knife. And I also say in a lot of my videos, I had this guy hand pick this knife for me. Okay, what that means is I had, a lot of times when you purchase a knife, especially a new knife, let's say a new case knife such as this, the individual doesn't even look at the knife. All right, it's been boxed up at the factory, it's been wrapped up in paper. When you purchase the knife, the individual that you're purchasing it from, the third party or the knife dealer, doesn't even look at what he's sending you. He just sends the box. All right. So basically, that dealer is trusting the case manufacturing company that they made this knife correctly. This particular one, I said in one of my videos that I had someone hand pick for me. What that meant was I had the individual go through a few boxes, and he picked the best out of 10 knives that he found. Okay, and he's a collector, so he knows what to look for. And I'm going to show you guys what to look for when you're purchasing a knife, or when you have the opportunity to hand pick one. So there's many different types of knives. So there's different things that you need to look for. A lot of people, the number one thing for a lot of people is blade snap. You know, how the knife sounds when it snaps into place. And what that is basically, I mean, obviously you're going to hear the snap, and what that does is it basically tells you how well the knife was adjusted and how powerful the back spring was, or is. Okay. It has a nice healthy snap to it. Some knives won't have that healthy snap to them. These Hawkbills always typically do. But when you don't get a healthy snap, you'll know exactly what that is. Can that be adjusted? It can be, but usually it's too late once the knife has been put together. Okay. A lot of times when it comes to stag-handled knives, or knives that are of natural materials, they're all different. So you could tell someone, for instance, hey, I really want a stag knife with a lot of knottiness to it, and I want it to look a certain way. And they can go through their knives and they can pick out one that suits your needs or suits your likings. Now, the newer case knives, something else that you need to pay attention to is all their shields are glued on, and that's something you really want to pay attention to, because a lot of them you will notice that maybe there's glue squeezing out, or they're not put on straight. Now, if you look at this one, it's relatively straight, but it's not as straight as, let's say, one that's been riveted on. So it's something you want to pay attention to. Okay. When I'm also, so let's say I'm picking up a knife, and I found it at a garage sale. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look the knife over. I'm going to make sure that it looks good. Now, the first thing I notice about this particular knife is that the back spring does not line up correctly with the bolsters, all right, or the liners. Okay, and these are the bolster linings right here. Okay. Now, that's not a done deal necessarily. Not all knives are perfect. So, you know, everybody has a different allowable limit, and that's when you you know, when you pick up a knife, you're like, my God, this knife's perfect. Well, that knife might sell for $125, okay? But if a knife has little defects such as this, that's just going to lower the value of that particular knife. A lot of the old knives that you'll find also, a lot of these older case knives might have also been manufacturer rejects. All right? And being manufacturer rejects meaning that back in the 40s or the 50s when this knife was made, maybe it was a manufacturer reject and it was just thrown into a pile of knives that should not have been for sale. Okay? And that's why a lot of these not so perfect knives look so good, is because they should not have been put. And back. So I left off basically, I got cut off talking about how some knives probably shouldn't have ever been up for sale, and that they were probably defects at the factory, and that now that they're older, they're being issued, or they're in circulation basically. So a lot of these knives that you do find that have a lot of these defects when it comes to the older ones were most likely rejected knives that shouldn't have been up for sale in the first place. Okay, so all right, really quick, I've picked up a knife. What do I do to look at it? Okay, so I found this knife, and hey, check it out. It's a beautiful knife, gorgeous. I like the scales on it. It's really cool. The bolsters and the fitting of the stag is really nice. So I'm checking that gap right there on both sides. Right there. Because a lot of times you'll have a little bit of a gapping right there. And sometimes the gapping is so unnoticeable, but when you start looking at the knife, you can push on it and you can actually see the scale bouncing up and down. Okay, so you want to make sure it's fitted nicely. You want to check your back springs, make sure that they're nice and tight. You got no gapping. Then you want to check the walk and talk of the knife. You want to make sure that it actually snaps open and it snaps shut. So I'll test all that out. I'll check for corrosion down in here. Okay. You want to check for blade play, spring, and all that is good. A lot of times when a knife has been used incorrectly, you're going to get that just massive amount of blade play, and that's probably one of the things that I dislike the most. You'll make sure that your back springs line up good in all positions, which this one does. Make sure your knife has been sharpened correctly. All right. Okay. So what are the defects that I find the most often? The most often defect that I find is severe blade play, such as this. And I wouldn't consider this severe blade play, but it's a substantial amount of blade play. And that's generally because the knife was either a manufacturer reject from the get-go from the factory, or someone used the knife incorrectly, or, for all I know, somebody actually replaced the blade on this with another blade. Okay. That's a very common thing that you will find, and you'll receive from a used knife. Okay, so that's something when it comes to like older knives on eBay, that massive blade play is probably one of the #1 things that's going to bite you in the butt. Okay, and that's because someone's used this knife incorrectly. Newer case knives, the #1 thing that I find that I dislike is just overall walk and talk. The knife does not snap like it should, does not operate the way it should. That's the #1 thing that I find wrong with these newer case knives. Other than that, the newer case knives look beautiful. It's just that they're not put together or fitted as well as they could be. But the materials they use and the way they put it together is beautiful. On custom or semi-custom knives, knives that are really high-end, things that you will find sometimes is maybe the centering of the blade in the closed position. That's not even really a defect, but it's something that might bother you, especially when you've paid an awful lot of money for a knife. But in some instances, there's almost really no way of getting rid of that. On multiple blade knives, the thing that I find the most, especially with the newer production knives, is severe blade rubbing. So for instance, like the center blade would come down and would literally it would just rub the hell out of this blade. What that would create is, number one, it wouldn't open and close the way it should. And you would get a huge scratch on both these blades. Okay. For a user or something like that, it really doesn't matter. You know, I'm talking, this is for the collector only. I'm talking about collectors. Of course, when you'd open these, you would check for blade play on all these. You're going to have a little bit of wiggle, always, on slip joints. You know, at least on factory slip joints, you're going to have a little bit of wobble on something. Just a little bit. On old bone-handled knives, I always check for cracking, especially, or the synthetic knives, like the yellow synthetic knives. It's really popular for them to crack down here, so you want to make sure that the crack is stable and that it's not going to propagate any farther than it has already. This one has a crack, but like I said before, that crack is not enlarging at all. So that crack to me really doesn't bother me very much at all. So I hope you found this helpful. This is how I inspect my knives and some pointers for you guys, how to hand pick a knife for your collection. And y'all take it easy. Subscribe, like the vid, it helps out. Thanks, I appreciate it.